Good stuff. Well, Mark, I know you wanted to talk about Planned Parenthood targeting the minority neighborhoods and the great job you did in researching this.
Well, yeah, we produced a DVD called Maafa 21, documenting that the original motivation behind the legalization of abortion had nothing to do with women's rights or reproductive freedom or choice or any of that other nonsense we hear that are basically just marketing hype to justify abortion. The real reason behind the legalization of abortion was racial genocide. And I think that we made an absolutely airtight case for that. We documented it. We spent 3.5 years researching it. And I don't think we've not been challenged on that. The pro-aborts will come out here and say, oh, that's not true. But then you say, okay, tell me what specific parts of it are not true. They run for cover. But one of the things that we argued in Maafa 21 is that the abortion industry took the advice of early eugenicists and social engineers, particularly a guy named Gunnar Myrdal, who wrote a book back in the 1940s, in which one chapter of that book he devoted to this idea of targeting racial minorities by locating the facilities to carry out that eugenics program in their neighborhood so they didn't have to travel, and that would increase the effectiveness of these programs. And we claimed in Maafa 21 that the modern eugenics movement, primarily headed up by Planned Parenthood, but others in the population control field as well, have done just what Myrdal suggested and placed their facilities there. The abortion lobby came out here after we released Maafa 21, and their only defense was to say that wasn't true, that they did not place their facilities in minority neighborhoods. So what we did is we conducted a 3-month, and it was, to be honest with you, very expensive to do and very challenging to do. We underwent a 3-month examination of this to see whether it really was true, whether we could document it with facts and figures that they were targeting the minority community. We knew anecdotally that they were. We knew that was beyond any doubt. But we had to have facts and figures. So what we did is we took every zip code in the United States that has either a Planned Parenthood facility or an independent abortion clinic, and we went to the U.S. government Census Bureau figures and looked at the racial makeup of the zip codes where all these facilities were located. We broke it down by Black and Hispanic. We then looked, and this was over 1,400 zip codes, by the way. We then looked at compared those numbers to the state averages. In other words, if a state has a Black population of 8%, but the abortion clinics are located in zip codes where there is 40 or 50 or 60% Black population, then clearly they're targeting. And that's exactly what we found. And, it is an outrage, and we've put this report out, and people can go look at it for free. They can download it and print it off, or they can just look at it online if they want. But the numbers are staggering when you look at them.
And numbers don't lie, Mark, right?
No, they don't lie. And
that's right.
The abortion industry is scurrying right now, looking for a response to this, because remember, this is not pro-life hyperbole. These are simply the facts and figures. You look at the zip codes, you look at the percentage of minority population according to the United States Census Bureau, you compare that with the state, and you've got your answer. And that's exactly what we did, and all those numbers are in this report. And this is a scandal. This is a scandal of epic proportions that's going on here.
Wow. And the worst part of this, Mark, is that this is funded with our tax dollars, isn't it?
Planned Parenthood alone, not counting the others that are involved, Planned Parenthood alone gets approximately $1 million a day in federal money alone. That doesn't count the state. That doesn't count the local municipalities that give them money. In federal dollars alone, they get about $1 million a day.
So we're helping to pay for this genocide. Mark, well, let me just make this announcement. You're listening to Crossroads, and our guest today is Mark Crutcher from Life Dynamics International. And Mark, what I wanted to ask you is, I know you did the study here on the Afro-American and Hispanic population. Is there any study done on, let's say, the Asian population or any other minority groups to see whether that's also a similar result?
Well, we didn't look at that. You have to understand that among minority populations, that population, except in very select locales around the country, is extraordinarily small.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, you have to go where the numbers are. And the numbers are in the Black and Hispanic population. And when you look at the results of this, for example, just in the Black community, Black women make up less than 13% of all the American female population, yet they have 37% of the abortions.
Right.
Black women now have an abortion rate 5 times as high as white women. A Black baby is 5 times as likely to be killed in the womb as a white baby is. And this is the inevitable result of the targeting and the marketing that has been done in the Black community. And now we're seeing, as our report shows, almost identical figures for the Hispanic community.
Yes. And, one thing that, I've worked extensively with Hispanic community. One thing I know about the Hispanic community is that when it comes to the census, they're uncomfortable. So as you point out in one paragraph here, it struck me about even if there are any errors, correcting them would be as likely to reinforce the findings as refute them. And I would add, if they actually had an accurate census count of the Hispanics, we'd be even more frightened, because I'm looking at, even for our local zip codes here, I know we have to go by what the census says, but because of their fear of the census takers and being undocumented, a lot of the Hispanic community members will run from the census. So I think it's even, as shocking as it is, I think it would be even more shocking if we had the actual stats on how many Hispanics live, in the community.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And even the Census Bureau points out, if you read their text, that they know that many Hispanics, when asked their race on the census reports, even if they cooperate with the census, they will list white. So we know that they're much higher represented in these numbers than what the numbers show. But all we can go by is what the numbers show.
Right.
We can't make up what we think it probably is, even though we might have real reason to believe that that's accurate. We just have to go by what the Census Bureau says. But you're absolutely right that the Hispanic community, and especially in states like, for example, here in Texas, is much larger than what the Census Bureau might show.
Right. So now, Mark, now that this report is out there, and in terms of what we're doing about it is just kind of promoting it and trying to, get people to read it and, it's part of our educational outreach, obviously. Where do you hope that this report goes, or are you looking to get the attention of the government, of whom to make some kind of response to this?
Well, yeah, we're first. We have to take this in stages. First, we have to light a fire. In other words, we have to let people know that this injustice is going on. Most people have no idea of the racial component to the issue of choice, if that's what you want to call it, abortion. And so we've got to educate the public better about this than what we have in the past. Once we have accomplished that, and we're getting a lot of support for this, by the way, from areas of the American population that we could have never dreamed of 2 years ago before we started this project. But we're going to have to educate the public, and then once we've got the public better educated, I think you're going to see that the minority community will take this bull by the horns and start wrestling. I think that they'll come up with their own plans for dealing with this once they're aware that it exists. And I don't think we have to worry about what their response will be to it. I think it'll be the appropriate response once they know about it.
Are you getting any coverage, Mark, from the secular media at all on this?
As you might expect, Ed, very little. This is not a message they want out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. We knew we would have to go around them anyway. And we are finding innovative ways to get around them.
Really good.
The message is spreading. So far, it has just exploded in the black community. And you can go online and go to hip-hop websites and find, the Maafa 21 trailer on the front page of hip-hop websites. The Nation of Islam is now getting real heavily involved in this.
Wow.
So, like I said, we're getting support for this from areas that we could have never dreamed of, 2 or 3, 5 years ago. So I think this thing is really starting to gain steam.
It's very interesting, though, isn't it, Mark, that abortion can be kind of accepted and okay, and yet when it comes down to racial targeting, people get upset and angry about it. It's before it's okay that abortion exists and okay that we're killing babies, but don't target certain ones. It's just interesting what makes people mad in terms of injustice.
Well, it does, but something you have to understand here is that if you look at polling that's been done on the abortion issue, whenever it's broken down by race, what you continually see, and I have seen this for many, many years, is that blacks poll more pro-life than whites, and sometimes by large margins. There was a poll years ago in the Washington Times of something like 2,500 people that they contacted on the phones, or made contact with on the phones. And that poll found that blacks were polling 20% more pro-life than whites were. So
really?
This has always been out there. It's just that the black community has concerns beyond those that the white community has. And so you've got to reach people where they are. And that's what we're trying to do here. We cannot force other people to adhere to some sort of dogmatic or political or any other kind of pedigree, cultural pedigree, in order to express their pro-life sentiment. And so what we're trying to do is give these people that mechanism.
Hey, Mark, I wanted to go over some of the stats based on the great work that you did. For instance, in Texas, I noticed it said that there are 94 zip codes in Texas, and that of those 94 zip codes, there are 22 that are not disproportionately black or Hispanic. In other words, there were 77% that are.
Yes, that's right, and that was typical of what we found around the country as we made the point, even in Connecticut. And by the way, you're reading from the text, but people need to understand we have the raw data for every zip code in the report.
Wow!
But
wow!
Even in Connecticut, a state that, as I say in the report, is completely unlike Texas in every area, size, culture, and geography.
Mm-hmm.
There are 21 zip codes in that state where there was a population control facility located, and only 6 were not disproportionately black or Hispanic.
Yeah.
So this is not just a southern thing or a northern thing. It's all over the country. They are targeting the black and Hispanic community clearly.
Yeah. You want to mention also New Jersey? There's a point there you made as far as New Jersey, where they had a black pop. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and again, these are the things that go on all over the country. But New Jersey had minority. What we try to show is that in a lot of places, you might find minority zip codes that were way disproportionate to the state. For example, in zip code 076131 in New Jersey, that zip code had a black population that was 286.7% greater than the state's population of New Jersey, and 106 in blacks, and 163.9 in Hispanics. And that one zip code had 4 population control facilities in it in one zip code. Now, remember, a zip code is a relatively small geographical area.
Mark, that's what I wanted to get to. I really wanted to prove the point on air that, yes, there's a targeting that is taking place. Imagine 4 abortion centers in one zip code area. That is a crime. If that doesn't stand out, I don't know what else is going to convince someone.
Well, if it doesn't convince them, that means they weren't convincible to begin with.
Yeah.
They're sold out to the abortion population control lobby and the abortion lobby, and they're not going to be convinced no matter what you show them if these figures don't prove that to them. And again, this was something we found across the country where you had these abortion facilities and birth control facilities and general population control facilities targeted to Black and Hispanic populations. It is absolutely irrefutable. There is no denying it. And by the way, I want to give everybody the website where they can go and download this report, or just read it online if they want to. But if they'll go to prolifeamerica.com, it's very simple, prolifeamerica.com. When they first access that website, this report pops up first. It's the first thing that pops up on the screen. So if they'll just go to prolifeamerica.com, they can read this report, and I challenge anyone to tell me that this doesn't prove our case.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark, I would, just and as a word of encouragement and support, and see how far this report is reaching. I'm a graduate student psychology right now. Happen to be in a class that we are looking at a lot of research and reports. So I took the liberty of bringing the report to class last night and just asked for a little attention to it, particularly with some of the students in the class that are Black, and wanted to point out to them just in terms of Florida, because obviously that's where we live, what it looked like. And let me tell you, it was the very first time that in this class that I've able to enter into a discussion about abortion and about their feelings about it. It really stopped them in their tracks. So I'm downloading copies for everyone to bring back next week. So it's just a small word of encouragement there, because I think that the impact of this report can be wide and far-reaching, but here locally, it's starting to have an effect as well.
Well, good. I appreciate your doing that, because we just put the tool out there. We can't be everywhere. We're here in Denton, Texas, and we can't be all over the country. So we've got to have people like you guys out there spreading this message, because, as we discussed a minute ago, the secular media in this country is not going to. They are owned lock, stock, and barrel by this population control cartel, and they're not going to spread this message. So we've got to do it individually.
Well, you're tuning in, you're listening to Crossroads Talk, and our guest today is Mark Crutcher from Life Dynamics International. Mark, give us that website again so that our listeners can download this great study that you did. Okay, it's prolifeamerica.com. prolifeamerica.com.
Good, and we'll link that on our website as well, Ed, so that the listeners can get it there as well. We'll link right there. Mark, just going out into a little wider spectrum here, Ed and I have both followed your work for many, many years, and, dating back to Lyme 5, which I still have worn copies on my shelf and have to take out now and then and use arguments and facts and stuff from there for folks. But what I'm always interested in your perspective. Your blog is great. It's always so thought-provoking, and it seems to go oftentimes in directions that a lot of pro-lifers, don't go. We're busy about, doing, and don't often take time to stop and think. And so I'm just wondering, throw a question to you here and your perspective. In terms of what we are doing as a pro-life movement, what are we doing right? And more importantly, I guess, what are we doing wrong?
Well, I have a speech that I give occasionally about this particular subject. I call it the George Bailey speech, because you remember in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey the movie starts with him on a bridge about to commit suicide. And he was convinced that his life had counted for nothing and that the world would be better off without him, and probably wouldn't even know whether he'd ever lived. And his guardian angel shows him, as you remember the movie, what the world would have been like without him and how much effect he had had and how he had changed everything. I try to make sure that the pro-life movement understands that concept as it regards them. It's very often true that pro-lifers look out here and they'll say, well, you know, this thing started with Roe versus Wade in 1973, and here we are almost 40 years later, and it's still going on, and we haven't made a difference. The reality is we have made an enormous difference.
Yes, I agree with you, Mark.
Let me just give you a couple of figures here. When I started Life Dynamics in 1992, now I'd already been working in the pro-life movement full-time 6 years prior to that, and 5 years prior to that as a weekend warrior. I started Life Dynamics in 1992. One of the first things we did is take inventory of all the abortion clinics in the country, because our goal was to go after the clinics as a business. There were 2,126 freestanding abortion clinics in 1992. Today, there are fewer than 640. 2/3 of the abortion clinics in this country have closed permanently since 1992, and they continue to close today at a rate higher than they've ever closed before. That would not have happened without the pro-life movement. I am telling you right now, had the pro-life movement not existed, you'd have abortion clinics in malls like Lens Crafters, and that is literally true.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we need to understand is just look at the abortion rate. If you go to the figures from the Soviet Union, when it collapsed, they released a lot of their health care figures. They have enormous health problems today with women in the Soviet Union. And they are attributing a large part of it to the fact that during the time of the Soviet Union, which was the first industrialized nation on earth to legalize abortion, during that time, the average Soviet woman would have 9 abortions during her lifetime. Some regions in the Soviet Union, it was typical for women to have 20 to 25 abortions during their lifetime. If we had not done what we've done since Roe versus Wade, that would be America today. And I could go on and on with this type of these kinds of stories and these analogies. But the fact is that the pro-life movement has done a lot of things wrong. There's no doubt about that. And you know, we have infighting and we have all kinds of weird things going on and stuff like this thing with Father Frank that's going on right now. But the fact is we have made an enormous impact.
Yes.
And it wasn't that many years ago when you'd see polling on abortion that showed 70 and 75% of the American people were labeling themselves pro-choice. And now the numbers are overwhelmingly in favor of the pro-life position. And the most encouraging thing is that if you break abortion attitudes down by age, it is the elderly that's the most pro-abortion and the young who are the most pro-life.
Yes.
Young people now are coming to the abortion pro-life side in droves. My daughter's a senior here at University of North Texas, and she's told me, hey, on college campuses now, it's cool to be pro-life.
Yeah.
And you had Margaret Sanger's grandson, the founder of Planned Parenthood, his grandson, not long ago in a national interview in New York Times Magazine, say that one of the most discouraging things for him as he travels around speaking for legalized abortion is that on every single college campus that he had been on in 2 years, there was an active pro-life group, but not one of those campuses had an active pro-choice group. And so we've done a lot of things wrong, and we can sit here and beat ourselves up if we want to. But the fact is, we're winning this battle.
Yes.
So for all our awards, we've done a lot of things right, too.
Yeah. To God be the glory. Mark, I see our clock is winding down. Do you attribute some of this stuff with the younger generation to technology today, the internet and all that information that's out there?
Yes, that's some of the technology. I mean, one of the aspects that technology has had. But let me tell you another one. Do you realize that there are an enormous number of young adults today who can go home and put a VHS tape in a player and see a sonogram of themselves?
Yes.
Indeed.
Right.
Yes. So
go
ahead.
Think about the impact that has on that child.
Mm-hmm.
When someone tries to tell them that the unborn child is just a glob of tissue or a mass of undifferentiated cells, And they go home and can look at themselves and have probably looked at it since they were children. You know, their parents have shown it to them 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty hard to convince that young adult that they were just a glob of cells when they can sit there and see themselves. This is not some hazy picture in the, off in the textbook somewhere. This is them that they're sitting there looking at. And this is one reason that the abortion industry has always said that sonogram and ultrasound technology is their biggest threat.
Mm-hmm. Mark, we're run out of time, but I want to just thank you. You've been listening to Mark Crutcher from Life Dynamics. Mark, tremendous study. Did you give us that website again?
It's prolifeamerica.com. That's our gateway website. And if you go to prolifeamerica.com, you can download this new report and or read it there on the online if you want.
Okay. Mark, we'll have to have you on again. This is really, we have to get this out. So God bless you, brother. Keep on trucking, and I know we're going to win this thing with God's grace.
In God's time. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. God bless you.
Thank you both.